At the beginning, we see our main hero, whose name is Yagiri. He's currently on a school trip riding a bus, but he fell asleep. While he's sleeping, Yagiri dreams about his past, where we see a younger version of him walking down a corridor in an underground secret facility, where he grew up as a foul-smelling lab rat just like in Stranger Things. Bullets are flying in every direction, but our hero is like Neo from the Matrix, and doesn't care about the bullets at all. He starts calling out to his caretaker, whom he calls his mother. She's known as Miss Saka, and Yagiri is really angry now because someone is holding his mother hostage and pointing a gun at her. In that moment, his mother feels worried and tells Yagiri to stay back, saying she's sorry to the boy. Right then, the person with the gun starts mocking Yagiri and tells him he's nothing but a worthless little orphan who has nothing left now. And before the criminal pulls the trigger, Yagiri suddenly looks at the culprit's face and uses a special instant kill ability that ends the criminal's life without Yagiri even touching him at all. This shocks his mother, Miss Saka. Then the scene switches and we're back on the bus trip. Here, a girl named Tamasha is yelling at Yagiri, telling him to wake up because the bus they're on is currently being transported to a strange world. But Yagiri still can't wake up. Moments later, Yagiri finally wakes up and asks Tamasha what happened while he was asleep, and she yells at him again, asking how he could sleep through one of the most tragic events in human history. After that, Yagiri realizes he's in a different world where a crazy dragon-like thing is attacking their school bus, and the legendary creature has already wiped out many students. Tamasha tells him the dragon is incredibly strong and was taking out students one by one. After that, Yagiri looks for anything he can use to scare the creature, so he picks up a random microphone and points it at the creature, but obviously it does nothing to the dragon. Instead, it makes the dragon extremely angry at Yagiri, and it's about to end their lives in seconds as it charges a fireball in its mouth, while Tamasha clings to Yagiri, fearing for her life. But just as it's about to blast them, Yagiri simply looks the dragon straight in the eye, and within a second, the giant creature drops to the ground and is erased from its own world by this skinny, Stranger Things kid from Japan. After Tamasha tells him she owes him for saving her life, she tells Yagiri that if he doesn't put his Game Boy away, she'll never leave him alone. So he puts it away and she starts explaining what happened to their school trip. Here, Tamasha tells Yagiri that while the bus was heading through a tunnel, as soon as they came out the other side, the whole scene changed and they arrived in a beautiful meadow. A random, rude, and super arrogant fairy named Sean appeared on the bus and welcomed them all to her world, which makes the principal angry. As soon as he sniffed Sean's hand, he disappeared into thin air. She warns everyone on the bus that her hand will make any one of them disappear as if she's wearing the Infinity Gauntlet, and that if they don't listen, she'll make someone else smell her hand and see if they can handle its scent. After that, she starts teasing the entire class on the bus, and tells them all she's an SSS rank witch, and the most powerful queen on the island, and that her power level is over 9,000, just a pop culture joke. But no one laughed, which annoyed Queensham. She told them it would be wise to laugh at her jokes from now on, otherwise they won't last long in this world. After calling them all a bunch of disgusting witches, who have no magical power of any kind, she says that after getting beaten, it's forbidden to exist in her world without having magic, because the whole point of this strange world is to level up, face each student, test them, and defeat the strongest creatures with their magic to see who will become worthy of being her successor. At that moment, she makes everyone on the bus glow along with a 3D stats screen. And here, she simply tells them the games will begin shortly because their first test is to defeat the powerful dragon that no one has ever been able to beat before. But Tamasha complains to the queen, saying she doesn't even have a stats screen and she's not glowing like the rest of the students. Tamasha notices how a few others aren't glowing either, like the arrogant popular girl Shinzaki, a boy named Kao, and also Yagiri, who was fast asleep during the entire transfer event and doesn't know anything about the fact that he's been transported to a whole new world. One of the girls tells the entire class that the dragon is approaching shortly, and it seems the dragon's level is over 100, which makes it 100 times stronger than any of these students. So they get scared and ask the queen to send them back to Japan. However, the annoying school jock in the class named Yakim, who thinks he's the Japanese Justin Timberlake, steps up and tells the class they have no choice but to take down the dragon and complete their first test to become first-class mages, which is all he wants, especially since Yasuki has granted the general class student strong powers and abilities at level 1. After his speech, all the gifted individuals get off the bus to wait to encounter the dragon and eventually kill the beast. to complete the first parallel world test. However, General Yazaki tells the 4 odd people who weren't blessed with any magic to stay on the bus because they can't help defeat anything in this world. He locks the bus door, and all the other talented students head into the forest and wait for the dragon to arrive. At this moment, the dragon appears, but as we know, Yagiri uses his crazy skill that basically lets him be a one-punch man for anything, using just his eyes, making him even stronger than Saitama himself. After seeing the monster fall to the ground, Tamasha asks Yagiri if he was the one who killed the dragon like that without even touching it, but he denies it and says he had nothing to do with it. He tells Tamasha he doesn't even have any magical power because he's a loser nerd loner, so how could a guy like him defeat the dragon boss? Suddenly, she remembers how Yagiri is the lazy student who sleeps all day, so what he's saying must be true. When they get off the bus, they notice something flying in the air above, and it turns out to be their classmates, who came back to see if the dragon had taken out the students who don't have magic. But to their surprise, the dragon was already dead, and they spotted the arrogant and annoying Tamasha and the lazy Yagiri down below. After they land, they tell Yagiri and Tamasha about their amazing magical skills in the parallel world, and each of these boys has a specific role to play. The chubby fat guy named Damon is a healer, Higashida is a powerful fire-glowing hero, and Yusaki is a necromancer. Damon is mad that Tamasha is alive because he can't harass her and turn her into a zombie using his healing magic, and together with the necromancer, he could have brought her back from the dead. But here the guy explains how he only came back to use the necromancer's ability on Tamasha so he could slap her cheeks after bringing her back from the dead, because she would never let him touch her in class or get close to her, so maybe her zombie version would let him. But here Tamasha tells the guy to go to and calls him the ugliest person in the class, so he shows off how strong he is compared to her, flaunts his crazy fireball ability, threatens Tamasha, and demands that she let him smell her feet, or he'll take them both out. But at that moment, Yagiri tells the dumb kid that he's weaker than he thinks, points a finger at him, and orders him to drop dead. They all start laughing, thinking Yagiri is just messing with them. But after a few seconds the fireball hero drops instantly and gets wiped out by Yagiri without even being touched. But Yagiri points his finger at the mage and erases him just like the hero. The only one left is the plump healer who tries to heal his friends. But resurrection or healing magic doesn't work on people targeted by Yagiri, and that's because of his power. After Mr. Chubby tells Yagiri how unfair his power is, and that it might be the most broken thing in the entire world, since Yagiri can just one-shot anything he wants. Yagiri tells the arrogant little dwarf that there is actually one thing in this world that can stand up to his instant ability, but it definitely won't be him. That's when the healer finally gives up and tries to befriend Yagiri, approaching him with friendly intentions. But Yagiri can tell when someone intends to kill him, and explains how his other power is a special sense that tells him when someone wants to attack him. That makes the healer boy collapse to the ground and beg the demon lord of this world to erase Yagiri, because he's simply too strong for anyone to handle. When Yagiri asks the little nerd why he's so hyped about this and what a demon lord even is, the healer tells Yagiri this isn't the first time he's reincarnated into this world, and explains how not long ago he and 2 of his friends were summoned here to a king's realm to defeat the demon king, but they failed, so they were sent here again. However, Yagiri has already wiped out his entire party, so they're all doomed. Yagiri doesn't believe him, though, because he's never seen him or the others miss any school days. The healer says that's because, in the magic world, it seems like they were here for months, but while they were traveling back to Earth, in the real world in Japan, they were only gone for a few hours, so it sounds like a lie. Still, Yagiri gets ready to end this boy's whole career, but then the boy promises to be his loyal servant, guide him through this other world, and help him find the demon lord. After that, he tells Tamasha they'll need to track down this demon king and finish it so they can go back to their world, and he can finally relax in peace and chill with video games and hot Cheetos anime recaps. Tamasha's surprised that Yagiri is helping her, but he tells her he's only protecting her because he remembers the soft feel of her chest when she tried waking him up on the bus, which makes her furious because she thought he was just a nice guy with no ulterior motives. But Yagiri likes all of us and he's definitely a man of culture. Meanwhile, we see Sajin squirming in her bed while she waits for her attendant Yoichi to report in. He explains that 4 people died in the first Sage test, including 2 unblessed people and 2 with S-rank abilities. This shocks Shin for a moment, but she decides to stall, just like you procrastinate on your assignments, and says it has to be something worth worrying about, before lying back down again. After that, Yagiri and Tomasha decide to go to the nearby city to see if they can meet their classmates. They arrive right before the city gates close and manage to get in, even though they don't know the language of this world. Soon a high-ranking officer approaches them, and it turns out he can speak their language. Yagiri explains. They got separated from their group and are now looking to reunite. The arrogant officer says he's been ordered not to interfere with sage candidates, but there's nothing stopping him from helping either. He says their classmates have already moved on to their next destination, and that's all he's willing to give them. But then he looks at Tomasha and says she alone can stay at his place for the night if she wants. Tomasha immediately grabs Yuji's hand and runs off, saying, "No thanks." Yagiri asks her what's wrong with her, and she says she was worried he'd send him to the underworld because of his rude behavior. Yagiri tells her to stop acting like he's some kind of crazy killer, but she says she's surprised he doesn't realize that's exactly what he is. With that, they start looking around at the structures and people of this fantasy world until they come across a cute cat girl named Miu who offers help for free. They ask why she's doing that, and she explains her goal is to date a sage candidate, which is why she's trying to befriend as many male candidates from the sage exam as possible. She says she heard they're prone to falling for cat girls like her and are usually really strong and rich too, so she's banking on her race and cute face. They decide to go along with it while she shows them around, and Tameki Chika ends up buying a set of clothes too. But by nightfall, it plays out exactly like Yagiri expected. They find out the cat girl is actually part of a band of thieves who surround them and plan to sell them as slaves to blow off some steam. After confirming they're up to no good, Yagiri starts the massacre by telling everyone behind him to die, then starts picking off the ones in front of him one by testing his ability on them. He tests whether he can make specific body parts die instead of erasing them entirely, and keeps doing that until only the cat girl and the bandit leader are left. After that, he runs a few final checks by telling them to die and lets them run for a bit before the ability kicks in, and then both get sent to the underworld too. After taking care of them, the two decide to sneak out, but the knights in the area stop them. Their captain, Edelgard, asks what happened there, and reveals they saw the men around them collapse out of nowhere. Yagiri asks why they didn't help if they were watching, and she reveals she planned to shadow them once they were captured, follow those bastards back to their base, and arrest their leader. She also tells them not to act all high and mighty just because they're blessed with the saint's protection, which makes them immune to enemy attacks. Then her vice captain speaks up and says that, according to his appraisal skill, these two don't carry any blessings from the saint. Hearing that, the captain says it's hard to believe they're responsible for those people collapsing and lets them go. The vice captain apologizes for causing them trouble, and shows them to a luxury hotel to stay the night, as thanks for their patience. At the hotel, Yagiri books 2 separate rooms, and as soon as Cha enters her room, she wonders if Yagiri is romantically interested in her. Then she feels a cold breeze, looks up, and finds a plump ghost floating in the air. At first, Tomasha is shocked, but then she takes a closer look at the ghost's face and wonders if it's her older sister. The ghost speaks and says her name is Makoko, the daughter-in-law of the founders of the Dana school and Tomasha's distant ancestor. She adds that she's her guardian spirit and tasked with restoring the Dana school lineage. Tomasha asks why she didn't show herself earlier, and Makoko replies she was scared of Yagiri because she might have been erased if he got startled and decided to get rid of her by accident. Then she asks Tomasha to explain her existence to Yagiri the next day so she can show herself without worry, and tells her she'll protect her from supernatural threats. She's also the one who kept her from getting that saint's blessing too, because once you accept it, you become her puppet. She also adds that her wish is for Tomasha to return to her real world, and to make that happen, she'll pass down her family's secret techniques and abilities so she can fight on her own too. The next morning, Tomasha walks out, meets Yagiri, and asks if they're going to chase after their classmates right away. Right then, the concierge approaches them and introduces herself as Celestina. Turns out, this hotel is a first-class establishment for the wealthy that handles anything and everything they ask for, as long as they can pay for it. Yagiri asks her to help locate their classmates, and she gives them a map of the royal capital and 2 tickets for a train headed there. She says that, according to their information network, their classmates are making their way to the capital through the forest while killing local monsters to level up. Yagiri also hands over all their gold and valuables to invest in some kind of high-yield accounts, and she sets up some items, including a charger for Yagiri's Nintendo Switch and translations to help them on their journey too. After that, they board the train and head to the capital. On the way, Tamasha tells Yagiri about Makoko and they relax. Tamasha ends up sitting next to Yagiri while his charger runs, wondering about their classmates. Suddenly, Yagiri grabs her and they hide as a powerful strike slices through the roof above their heads in a single blow. A train staff member tells everyone to stay calm and head somewhere safe, where they see a robotic alien called the Aggressor invading their world and fighting a sage named Sana. Their fight looks like it's from another world, with both of them trading mountain flattening attacks. Tamasha asks Yagiri if he's going to wipe them both out for getting in his way, but he says that's not a reason to kill someone. He says he needs to set a clear standard so he doesn't end up killing innocent people over small things like annoying him and such, because that wouldn't be fair. Soon, the battle between the sage and the aggressor brings them close to Yagiri, and the sage, being arrogant and conceited, kills a bunch of trained passengers behind them, saying they're just collateral damage in their fight and that Yagiri and Tamasha should bow their heads before his great wisdom. This bothers Yagiri enough that he turns off the sage's life switch, and seeing that makes the aggressor genuinely afraid of him, he completely surrenders to the protagonist and offers to help in any way he can. Yagiri asks him about ways to return to his original world, and the robot says he only knows how to get back to his own world and can't take him there because it's too dangerous on one hand, and second, he didn't bring his real body here, so he can't actually take things out of this world with him anyway. He also tells Yagiri that if he has enough mana and the right coordinates, he can definitely return to his real world. Yagiri says that's fine and asks him to guide him once he has the mana and coordinates, and the robot happily agrees to make the most of it. Makoko also asks the robot for a shape-shifting weapon to help Tamasha in her fights. On the other hand, we see the knights in the city taking one of the thugs who lost his sight after Yagiri killed him to an immortal vampire sage named Lin. She tries to heal the eye by reconstructing it from scratch, but it doesn't regain function. She also tries to turn the thug into her minion by biting his neck, but that doesn't work either. But then someone breaks into their room, and it turns out to be a hero who's supposed to fight monsters and aggressors. The hero says he has to put an end to the tyranny of the sages, and uses his special attack called Plane and Two Towers to blow up the whole place. But he does no damage to the vampire sage, because she says if ending her life were that easy, things would be much better. Then she says she's too bored to deal with him and simply kicks him out of her tower without killing him. After that, she asks the knights to track down Yagiri and find his location, then heads off to meet the sage Shin and talks to her about this man with the instant death ability. Shin says she'd prefer Lin not interfere with the sage nomination trials, but if she handles the disaster known as darkness for her, she'll allow it. And Lin agrees and asks the commander of her subordinate army, the immortal core Masayuki, to go to the city of Hanabusa because they might need them there. Meanwhile, we see Eri and Tachiki making their way to the nearest city from their train wreck, which happens to be Hanabusa as well. The city looks very modern, with tall skyscrapers and buildings like modern Japan. While walking, Makoko notices that instead of being protected by physical walls, the city is surrounded by a protective barrier that keeps monsters out. They soon arrive at a first-class hotel recommended to them by Celestina, and upon entering, they coincidentally run into one of their classmates, named Yuki, who's now wearing some fantasy-style clothes. Tamasha asks him what he's doing there when the others should still be in the forest working on their levels, but he says he's moving separately from them because he has a more efficient and superior way to level up. Then he introduces his harem of 5 female bodyguards he picked from his sea of girlfriends. Yagiri wonders what he's been up to, and Tamasha explains he was always popular with girls because of his good looks, but it seems there's something more to it. At that very moment, Yuki turns to her and asks if she'd like to be his mistress, which dries her up so much the Sahara Desert would get jealous. She asks what makes him so confident, and he explains he's been blessed with one of the strongest classes in this world, known as the Dominator, which lets him turn weak opponents into his servant. Turns out, when Yuki and the others were grinding together in the forest, everyone tried to avoid him because of his class, But then Ardo approached him and revealed he's a consultant class. He tells him the hidden details of the Dominator skill and suggests a plan he figured out after watching the anime, The Rising of the Shield Hero. He asks him to buy low-level slaves and then make them fight on his behalf to gain experience and level up. This pyramid scheme leveling idea resonated with him, along with his desire to have his own harem, and led to this situation. After hearing this, Tomasha rejects him and says she'll stay with Yagiri, and the two walk away. Meanwhile, we see the vampire sageling fighting the aggressor called Darkness. Yagiri decides to get some rest and ends up sleeping for 3 straight days while Tomasha waits for him in her room the whole time. While doing that, Makoko tells her someone's watching her with hostile intent, and she decides to wake Yagiri and ask him to come to her room. Yagiri steps out, uses hostility detection hacking, then snipes Yuki's weakest bodyguard, Erika, with the instant death ability. After that, he goes into Tommy's room and tells the hotel front desk that a woman collapsed in the hallway on his floor. At the same time, we also see the immortal core of the lions causing chaos in the city streets, riding over civilians and turning them into zombies, making them part of her army. Meanwhile, Yuki notices Erika's signal has disappeared and wonders what happened to her, and sends 2 of his bodyguards to secure Tomasha while he clears a deep 150-floor dungeon by turning defeated monsters into his servants. On the other hand, Yagiri and Tomasha decide to leave the hotel to avoid any fight with Yuki, but they get ambushed by the leader of his bodyguards, Riza the Ice Witch. She says she's there to take Tomasha and freezes them both in solid ice. But Yagiri kills the ice with his ability and makes it super easy to shatter. This shocks Riza, and she tries to cast another spell. But Yagiri kills the spell, and then kills her staff too, making her drop to her knees. After defeating her, Yagiri asks if she can use magic without her staff, and if she has any other staves. She says she's a staff lady and can only use magic through staves, and that she has a small spare one in her treasure chests. She also tells them Yuki's orders to capture Tomasha, and at that moment, they're attacked by a doll crawling on the wall. But Tomasha puts it down using her martial arts skills that manifest thanks to Moko's effect. Turns out they're Chelsea's dolls, another of Yuki's bodyguards, and Yagiri disposes of most of them with his ability too. At that moment, Riza tries to surprise them using a tiny one disguised as a hairpin, but Yagiri puts it down with his ability as well. After that, they go out to make Chelsea stop fighting too, and she gives up all the information she has on Yuki and his plan. Seeing Riza and Chelsea defeated, Yuki decides to lure them using a fleet of cockroaches. He controls with his Dominator class ability and makes them attack the pair, but Yagiri uses his Wi-Fi monitoring hack to locate him and throws him into the dungeon. On the other hand, we see Yuki's remaining bodyguards, Euphemia and Stephanie. While Stephanie wonders what to do now that she's freed from his contract, she decides to stay by his side and cries for a while Euphemia makes her way out of the dungeon and wonders why there's so much light coming from the entrance. After getting out, she finds herself in a desert, then turns around to see darkness devouring the city, leaving nothing but sand in its wake. She also finds a lion flying in the sky, and says her attacks are useless against the formless darkness, and there's nothing she can do to stop it now. She flies down and casts a spell on her, turns her into her servant, and makes her tell her everything she knows. Meanwhile, Yeri and Tamacha make their way out of the hotel and wonder what's going on outside, as everyone around them has turned into zombies and someone is shouting on a loudspeaker that the zombie party is about to begin. Both decide to run away from the city, while Leon tells Euphemia she wants to know whether Yeri can kill her with his ability or not. At the same time, we see the commander of the Immortals Company talking to the city mayor, named Ryota, who turns out to be Leon's servant too. Masayuki tells Ryota to hand over the city's key. It's an order from the sage Leon, then uses public loudspeakers to tell the city's districts that he's looking for these 2 people, displaying Yagiri and Tom's photos on every screen in the city. He tells them that if they want to live and not turn into zombies, they need to move fast, because he's also sealed the city with a barrier using the key. This makes Rare really angry, because he worked hard to make this city prosper. But he can't do anything against Leon's orders now. With everyone coming after Tasha's bat on the ketones, Yagiri decides to head to the city square to strike a deal with Masayuki himself. Once he gets there, he tells him to lower the barrier because they want to board a train and go to the royal capital. But Masuki asks if they even know what kind of situation they're in while he raises his army of undead soldiers. He says those who are already dead can't be killed, but Yagiri simply wants them to die too, using his opus ability. This really shocks Masayuki and he asks how that's possible. And Yagiri explains in the most badass way that he's the one who decides whether something is dead or not. Hearing this, Masayuki gets angry and says, "There's no way such a ridiculous ability exists in this world," as he starts transforming into his werewolf vampire mode. But Yagiri just cuts off his transformation monologue, saying he doesn't need to wait for the most disgustingly cringe anime fool to finish his lame transformations. He then turns to Ryota and asks if he can put the barrier back up properly and asks why everyone is after them. He explains they were in lands controlled by the Sage Leon, and he doesn't know why she's interfering in Sage Shin's selection test. At that moment, they notice the townspeople walking toward them like they're possessed by something. Makoko says it looks like they're being controlled using some kind of spiritual link, and Rhoda says if that's the case, he should be able to protect them with the city barrier. But to his horror, the barrier isn't working, and it looks like Leon is interfering with it herself. With that, the civilians start attacking Yagiri and they start dropping around him like dead moths, as his ability automatically sends them to the underworld. Yagiri notices how hard it is for the mayor to watch them die, and tells him to get closer to him unless he wants to get hurt by them. He says it feels like someone's trying to test the limits of his abilities, and something similar happened to him in the past. At the same time, we see Leon watching the city from afar, along with her newly acquired servant. As the darkness approaches where Yagiri is, she creates a clone of herself without any memories of Yugi, tells it to ascend into the sky and multiply, then attack the city if they see something unusual happening, like the darkness attacking or disappearing suddenly. She says that since these clones have no memory of Yagiri, their attacks shouldn't generate any hostility toward him. And even if he finds them using his observation, hacking like he found Yuki, he shouldn't be able to harm her real body because it's different from the clone. On the other hand, we see Yagiri and the others notice the darkness approaching them and turning everything it touches into sand. Everyone wonders how to deal with it, but Yagiri says he'll simply kill it using his ability and makes the darkness vanish into thin air. But suddenly, red meteor-like attacks start pouring from the sky and destroying the city. Tamacha uses her sharp eyesight and says they look like a lady with red hair wearing a red dress, and Ryota confirms it's the Sage Leon and wonders why she's doing this. Losing all respect for her, they wonder how to handle this attack now, as Yagiri says they're too fast for his ability to lock on, and they also don't have any hostility he can track. Only if they can make her aim directly at him will he be able to hit her again with his ability. Ryota suggests they head to the open park area, which is most likely to be attacked next. According to the data he's been analyzing, thanks to the bird's eye view skill he got from being mayor, he then transfers them to the park, using his authority as the city's mayor, and disappears. Moments before Leon's clone attacks them, Tamacha manages to spot it in time for Yagiri to locate and eliminate it using his ability. Tacha also shields them from the blast using Makamoko's powers and the morphing material they got from the giant attacking robot. On the other hand, we see Leon talking to Yu, and she reveals that all her blood clones were defeated by Yugiri's ability. She says, now, she just needs to create dolls with different memories so he can't target them all at once. But to her surprise, her real body is killed in her home, leading to her total demise. But before she falls, she feels relieved that this will be her way to get a new life using one of her biologically engineered experimental bodies without any of her memories. At this moment, we see a young girl with pink hair waking up in a coffin somewhere in a manor, and she picks up a display stone containing Leon's final recorded message. And the message tells her who she is, how she wants her to live her life, and how she has none of her memories to prevent being affected by Yui's ability. Back in the city, we see Eri and Tamacha return to Ryota, revealing they defeated the sage and asking if that bothers him at all. Rai says he has no respect for someone who harmed his precious civilians, and gives them a military-grade vehicle to travel to the royal capital. In the car, Tamacha asks Yagiri if he should be the one driving, but he says he always ends up crashing while playing racing games, so Tamacha takes the wheel herself. Makoko says she should be able to drive and operate all kinds of vehicles and weapons thanks to her innate talent as heir to the Dana school, which doesn't make sense to her, but she just goes along with it. While all this is happening, we get a little glimpse of what the other sage candidates are doing in the forest. The samurai class candidate named Rako finishes killing monsters for the day and returns to her camp, where she finds the American ninja classmate Carol holding her phone in her hands. She asks what she's doing in her camp with her phone, and she explains she found it lost in the forest and was here to return it. She also reveals she took it upon herself to check their apps to see what they were using to track Yagiri. Turns out they're government spies from Japan and America respectively who joined Yugi's class to monitor him. The Americans were using a satellite to observe him in the real world, but it's useless in this world, which is why Carol was looking into what the Japanese were using, since they're the ones who have his physical custody. Rallo opens her app, and to her horror and alarm, it shows that the first gate of Alpha Omega is opening on the other side of the map. We see Tamacha driving like a panicked duck, making life-saving turns along the crazy mountain road to reach the capital. She eventually runs into a giant boulder in her path and decides to stop, glancing at Yagiri, who was somehow asleep, even with all her screaming during this wild ride. At this moment, we see what Yagiri was dreaming, diving into a flashback from his childhood when this office lady met him for the first time, gave him the name Yagiri, and taught him how to shake hands. This lady is named Saka Takedo, and we see her signing a contract form during an interview for a special job. The agreement says she won't complain even if she dies during her tenure. At first, she decides to walk away instead of signing away her soul. But the interviewer, Yoko, manages to convince her by telling her she'll get retirement benefits if she agrees. After signing the agreement, she asks if there's some kind of ultra-secret villains organization or something like that, but the scientist says they're a respectable society conducting special human experiments to improve their community. Then he tells her the job is to babysit a monster. She asks what it looks like, but Yoko says he hasn't seen it himself and all he knows is it can kill anyone just by thinking. Its codename is Alpha Omega, and they think that by providing it with modern education and basic humanity, they might be able to stop it from wiping out all forms of life from the face of the planet. He tells her she has a teacher's license, so she's the right person for the job. He then takes her to an underground room and tells her she can't go past this line, and that everything she might want to know about this job is written in this manual. After getting everything she needs, she enters the room and opens the massive vault gate with her keycard, discovering she's in a sort of artificially created facility with a natural-looking sky and a landscape in the background too. She looks at the manual to find the house where this monster is supposed to be living, and after going in, she finds only a small child sitting in the living room. This makes her really angry, and she says it's ridiculous to confine a child in a place like this. She takes him out and tells him to go play with tadpoles or something like that. But the child notices a shadow demon behind her and kills it using his powers. He tells her those things sometimes come to attack him, but there's no need to worry about them. Also, it's about to get dark, so if it's okay with her, he'd like to play tomorrow instead of now. Hearing all this calms aka down, and she shakes his hand and introduces herself by name. She asks him what his name is, and he says they call him Alpha Omega here, and before he came here, they called him Lord Akashi. At that moment, they both hear their stomachs growl and decide to go inside and eat something. Soka realizes she'll have to cook too, but being as good a cook as a dumb sandwich, she ends up making some instant ramen while the boy takes a bath. During their meal, she asks him what name his mother used to call him by, but he doesn't know what that is, so she ends up naming him herself and gives him the name Yagiri Takato, which makes him really happy. She then teaches him how to introduce himself with a handshake and say, "Nice to meet you." At that moment, we see Eri wake up to Tamash's hand, who tells him they've reached a dead end. They both decide to take another route and turn back, but the car hits a small dragon on their way back. They both get out of the car and Yagiri takes care of the beast, before a fleet of dragons pops out of nowhere and starts flying toward them too. Yer shoots them all down too, and afterward, they meet the golden lightning dragon, who says they've passed and starts flying away. But Yagiri stops it and asks it to come back and tell them what it meant by that, otherwise, he'll do some pest control on it too. The dragon returns, turns into a small child, and explains she was testing them to see if they were worthy of seeking the Swordmaster. They ask who this Swordmaster is, which surprises her, because she thought they were there to take the Swordmaster's trial. They tell her they were on their way to the royal capital and got lost. She introduces herself as Attila and offers to help if they agree to go see the Swordmaster with her afterward. After they agree, she takes them to a mystical forest where the Swordmaster gathers all the applicants for the test. There they meet an old man named Or, who announces that if half of them aren't gone within 10 minutes, they'll all fail, marking the start of a massive battle royale. The first to get chopped is this pathetic loser, followed by a bunch of others, including a shady group of mages that Yagiri sends to with his ability. They both also get covered by a righteous knight named Rick, who manages to save the loser Beta, who got cleaved in two. His name is Lonnie, thanks to a special stone called the Apology Stone that gives him random powers and buffs. After that, they all head to the next stage of the test. Lionel also explains he got these stones from a lord's to make up for the terrible luck he suffers from. He says he gets new stones every night, and they can be used to summon random items and effects through the GA system. As they get close to their next destination, the miasma in the area gets more toxic, so bad that Lonnie pukes on the ground, but Makoko suddenly notices the miasma has vanished and wonders what caused it, while we see Yagiri acting strangely. After that, they head to the tower, where Or shows them a giant sealing spell with the Dark King sealed inside, along with the former Swordmaster who thrust her sword through both of them as they were sealed, in a seal where time flows extremely slowly. Orban explains it's their duty as Swordmasters to defeat the Dark King once he's released, but then a witch girl reveals herself and throws a massive fireball at the Dark King, saying she'll defeat him once and for all, but the spell just stagnates within the time seal, and she realizes how dumb that was. Rick tells Yagiri the witch is named Frederica, and she's his friend who told him to take the Swordmaster's test to begin with. After that, the examiners tell everyone they need to reach the bottom floor of the tower while defeating monsters and completing different tasks. To earn the points they need, earn 100 points within the next 24 hours, and also reach the bottom and to pass the test. Meanwhile, Tamasha looks at the Dark King and asks Yagiri if he can kill him too or not, and Yagiri tells her something that really shocks her. After hearing him out, they both decide to hurry down the tower and join Rick and Lionel. Thanks to everyone going ahead of them, they can pass through without worrying too much about monsters and traps, but Lionel still manages to get himself killed by an arrow trap. His apology stones help him with all that as usual. They even run into one of the king's knights named Teresa, who's supposed to be under Yurei but went rogue after killing too many people during the test and is now rampaging. Rick struggles against her for a while, and it looks like we're about to see an epic fight. But Yagiri puts an end to all of it with his ability and tells everyone to hurry up. After that, they reach floor 998, which turns out to be a safe area with lots of rooms for participants to relax in. They all decide to go their own ways from here. Rick keeps moving forward. Lionel decides to rest until midnight to get new stones, while Tamasha and Yagiri take a good nap. At midnight, Lionel gets a special anniversary event pull from his gacha system, and manages to summon the lords who brought him into this world and gave him the Apology Stone. She says she only showed up to laugh at him, then takes her leave, while Yagiri and Tamasha simply sleep in the same bed. The next morning, when they wake up, they see Makoko half stuck in the wall, and she says something is pulling all the spirits in the tower upward. Yagiri helps her by killing the absorption mechanism, then tells Tamasha to get ready, because from this point on he's going to kill everyone without discrimination, since they're in a dangerous place. She says that's fine, she's already steeled her nerves, and she's not hypocritical enough to blame him while he's doing it to save her. Hearing that makes Yagiri genuinely happy, and he gets shy and red, says he's hungry, and orders room service for their meal. On the other hand, we see a sage named AI fighting another summoner, sage named Roto, who abandoned his duties as a sage after coming to this world, set up a community of beacons in the forest, and decided to live there in peace. AI's job is to assassinate sages and sage candidates who abandon their duties, and she has a power called the Fair World, which lets her manipulate the powers granted to herself and others by Lord to the utmost degree. She kills Roto, and her dagger tells her that her next targets are the sage candidates, Yagiri and Tamasha, and tells her to head toward them. On her way, she ends up being chased by a fatty, who turns out to be none other than Damon, who'd been wandering the forest since episode 1 following Yujiri's orders. It seems he somehow got rid of his Link servant, and reveals he was taken in by Roto, but now that he's dead, he wants to follow AI and begs her to let him become her slave. With that, the two head toward Yujiri's location and run into the gold or the dragon from before. Damon worries that AI won't be able to defeat the dragon because her ability only lets her handle cheat skills given to people from another world, but she says she can interfere with any natural phenomenon and make it as she believes it to be, but that doesn't work if her target has enough Lux D. She then makes the dragon unable to fly because it's too big, and before she can do anything else, an attacker named Hedgehog shows up out of nowhere and kills the dragon with his sharp leg. He then disappears into the distance, while the path to the Swordmaster's tower appears for AI. Meanwhile, Yagiri and Tacha make their way through nearly half the tower until they run into a silver-haired man who accuses them of cheating. The man introduces himself as Glacio, the creator of the tower, and tells Yagiri he's upset because Yagiri's been bypassing all his traps by killing them with his ability. He says Yagiri is too dangerous to be left alone. He starts setting up some big spells and says he'll give them a choice, but Yagiri eats him to the other world, saying he's in a hurry. After that, they go to the next area where they find another Dominator using his harem of girls to fight another test contestant, who turns out to be a half-demon like Euphemia. Yagiri asks for permission to pass since he's not interested in fighting, but the Dominator says he'll let them through if they defeat his guards in a 3-on-3 match. Yagiri agrees and wipes them all out with his ability, then starts walking forward. That really pisses the Dominator off, and he tries to stand up to cast a spell, but Yagiri puts him down just as fast, calling him a liar. Seeing all that, the half-demon girl says she has a request for them, and they decide to at least hear her out. The girl introduces herself as Thea and explains she's looking for her little sister. She says she came here because she heard some of her people are trapped here, and helping her might seem like it goes against the Swordmaster. Yagiri says he's already made a mess of the Swordmaster's tower, so the Swordmaster won't like him anyway, so he has no problem helping her. He then asks if she has any clues about where her people are, and she says she can sense their presence, and it seems they're somewhere underground. At that very moment, Rick, Frederica, and Lionel enter the arena too, and it turns out Rick and Frederica were helping Lionel get some points too because he's a loser. After that, they all reach the bottom floor, where Orb announces they've all passed the test and are now Knights of the King. At that very moment, the tower maintenance crew enters and tells them the first barrier around the Dark King has been nullified, and, for some reason, the tower is no longer working. This shocks your AE, and he wonders what happened. But then someone suddenly blows up the entire tower above them and reveals himself as a high-ranking demon accompanied by another of his kind. It seems their goal is to revive the Dark King, and they prepare to fight Orob and his knights. The demon seems to have the ability to switch off the humans around him, while the other is very skilled in magic. He blocks Frederica's fire magic with his bare hands, and then turns her staff along with her arm into a biscuit and lets her taste it, saying it's very sweet. Frederica wonders if she's about to become the red-haired Empress of the Sea, but quickly remembers she's just a side character in this side arc. Seeing all this, Lionel uses his remaining limited edition gacha pull, and spends all his apology stones to summon some kind of miracle to help them deal with the demons. But he ends up summoning the lords from before, to everyone's horror. He asks if she's going to vanish again, but she says this time she'll grant his wish and take care of everything. She steps toward the demons, and to everyone's surprise, they both bow to her and reveal she's actually the Dark King's wife. She'd been summoning heroes and manipulating them to release her husband from the seal, but always failed because of the Swordmaster, yet, thanks to this unlucky piece of trash named Leal, she managed to get rid of the barriers this time. Lionel asks if she was lying about taking care of everything and granting his wish, and she says she didn't lie, she'll take care of all of them by destroying all humanity, leaving nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Yagiri, Tamasha, and Theota decide to go underground to find her people, and thanks to Yujiri's powers, they manage to kill the space-time barrier hiding the basement. Tamasha also notices some high-speed robots rushing past them with some blades, but they decide to ignore that and focus on the underground room ahead. Once they enter, they find the room filled with liquid chambers, with Ada's people used as guinea pigs for horrific experiments and their magic used to support the barrier around the Dark King. Thea decides to end their misery with her own hands, then resolves to get revenge on the Swordmaster. However, they all return to see what was happening. On the other side, we see Lionel trying to stall the lords to create a chance for the Swordmaster to kill her. While doing that, he gets the lords to reveal that she'd been waiting for all kinds of obstacles to be removed from her path, including the tower's creator, AA, because he would have been able to restore the barrier instantly. She was also worried about the Lord's killer who suddenly died during the trial, and now she's able to break the barrier to free her husband. With that, she destroys the barrier's core and releases the Lord King and the Dark King from their time seal, but to everyone's surprise, the Dark King just falls into the river with his dead butt and drifts away. They all wonder how that could have happened. while we find out that this is what Yagiri was doing, and that he accidentally killed the Dark King in response to a high density of miasma in the area that was about to hurt him. In that very moment, Ada takes advantage of all the confusion and slices the Swordmaster in half to get revenge. This really shocks Rick and the others, and they wonder if she's an enemy. At the same time, the high-speed robotic assailant Hedgehog shows up in the battle zone, assassinates the lords, and runs off. The two demons who started all this restore her to full health and rally their forces to attack the humans to avenge their king. But Yagiri simply wipes them all out with his ability and tells them he doesn't want any drama. This whole thing makes the lords lose her mind and start firing random abilities in all directions. Tamasha asks Yagiri if he's going to do anything about her, but he says the lords didn't do anything to him, so he has no reason to fight her. On the other hand, we see A dragging Damon toward the tower while dodging all the random attacks with her ridiculous ability. Once she gets there, she uses her appraisal skill to tell Rick he can take the lords down with his sword, which he does. Then he turns to Yagiri and Tamasha to see what's up with them before fighting them. She uses her eye on Yagiri to check his stats, but it shows her the end of everything inside him, which makes her soul sweat, and she decides to get her butt out of there before handing Damon over to Yagiri. Yagiri wonders what that was about, but he turns to Damon and asks how he managed to get out of his collar. He says he never said its effect. Rick keeps apologizing for deceiving them, then talks to them about Theodosia and what she did, and Yagiri asks him to show what they found in the basement. If he decides to fight them, he'll help Adai. Rick asks what he can even do with his little staff, but the Lord King stops him and tells him that Yagiri is the one who took down the Dark King and all the demons around them, which really shocks Rick. He apologizes for his rude behavior, and then they all decide to split up. Rick, Frederica, Lionel, and the Lord King head to the royal capital, while Yagiri and Tomochi decide to go there on their own as well. Thea reveals her younger sister's name, which turns out to be Euphemia, and Yagiri and Tomochi say they heard that name while walking through one of the towns on their way. They tell her the routes they took before leaving. Rick also gives them 2 pendants with the royal crest and says they should show these trinkets to the guards in the capital if they need any help from him. With that, Yagiri and Tacha start their journey to the capital, leaving Damon to rely on his wits, but unfortunately for him, he ends up approaching one of the demons who attacked the tower, who tells him to follow him. While all this is happening, we see she sipping some sweet tea, while her knight reports on Al and Yagiri. She says they shouldn't interfere with the sage candidates and decides to summon someone from Yagiri's world to ask about him. Turns out, the summoned man is one of the Japanese scientists who had been monitoring him, and when he learns she's the one who made Alpha Omega disappear from their world, he calls her a savior and thanks her. But then he notices a warning on his device saying he's a low-level employee and isn't allowed to approach Alpha Omega, and he ends up self-destructing into a pile of soft pizza in front of the sage on the other side of the map. Back at the place where the bus was attacked by the dragon, we see Ayaka suddenly regain consciousness as she's brought back to life by a kind of sensing chat PT. The AI tells her she needs to get a large amount of nutrition to kickstart her recovery or she'll die within 30 minutes. Ayaka decides to eat some delicious rotten dragon, and let's talk more about that in the comments. Meanwhile, Yagiri and Tacha arrive at the royal capital and are stopped by the royal knights, who ask them to get out of their car and show their IDs. They explain they got the car from the mayor of Hanabusa City and that they're sage candidates here for the trial. The guard scans them with an appraisal tool, but Yagiri shows them the pendant Rick gave him, which makes them all kneel. They explain it's a mark of the royal family and gives them clearance to enter the city. At that moment, the youngest prince, David, arrives and demands they show their swords as knights of the Lord King. Tamaki ends up accepting his challenge to a duel when they fail to show him any swords. In the duel, she shows off her family's martial arts and ends up freeing David's future generations from the pain of childbirth by landing a strike on his precious egg. David turns into a gentleman and offers to give them a tour of the city. He explains how the city walls were built thousands of years ago by the great sage, Aga, the same man who created that tower. He also tells them the royal capital is built on an underground barrier that seals a Dark Lord, like the Swordmaster's tower, which surprises Yagiri and Tacha since they didn't expect there to be more than one Dark Lord. After that, Yagiri asks Tomochi if they should forgive their classmates or take revenge on them, and Tomochi decides they should meet them first and see what stance they take. They then join their classmates at the royal palace, where they all meet the king. The 3 bad from the class class, now known as the Three Bad Lords Beta, decide to assert dominance by revealing that one of them has the ability to stop time as he approaches the king and acts rudely toward him. But the king snaps his fingers and reveals that their powers are greatly weakened if they try to fight anyone connected to the royal family, and that they've been granted the protection of the sages. He then sits on his throne and says that to become sages, they must achieve a great feat within 1 month, otherwise they'll all fail. After that, the king leaves. Tachik and Yuri officially announce their presence. They all talk, and Yagiri and Tacha eventually agree to join them without any violence. They make up a cover story that Yagiri instantly got the bug-killing skill, and Tacha got a special shield creation skill that only works on her. Thanks to these skills, they managed to escape the dragon, cause the class leader says he still thinks they did the right thing by leaving them behind as bait, since the priority was the survival of the many. With that out of the way, they all start wondering how to pass the sage exam, and end up getting help from the royal family, who suggests they head down into the underground dungeon and defeat the Dark Lord as their feat. With that, they all form parties and go underground, led by David and Rick, who eventually arrive at the royal capital with the Lord King as well. While Tamachi is busy shaking her butt in the underground dungeon, Yagiri joins the losers group from their class, including 2 other guys, one with the ability to cook and the other with the ability to read anything. Soon, another man named Sihi joins them. He has an ability called Lord of Death, which is very similar to Yagi's instant kill ability on his target, but it's an inferior version of Yagi's power. The man sits in front of Yagiri and reveals that he's with the cult, which is another organization cheering him on as the Lord of Death, and he's also the one who refers to him as Lord Akashi. The man says he had been watching him with his mechanical eye, but it stopped working since they came to this world. Then he walks away, saying he'd be happy to serve him if he needs his help. After that, the other 2 spies also contact Yagiri and Tamacha and apologize for deceiving him all this time. Yagiri says he doesn't mind as long as they don't cause him any trouble and lets them focus on their survival in this new world. He says he wants to meet Sage Shin because she might know a way to return to their world. While all this is happening, we find out that Euphemia managed to meet Leon's new body and decides to serve her. The new body names herself Rally and takes Euphemia with her on a journey to find the man named Yagiri. Besides that, Shin goes to Sai in the Sage world and discovers she's suffering from PTSD after looking at Yagiri. She gets worried and says she needs to get more information about what he actually is, and decides to go meet his classmates. At the same time, the Demon Generation teams up with Damon because he knows about Yuri and takes him to the royal capital to unseal the younger and stronger sister of the late Dark King who resides beneath the royal capital. Once they enter the city, they go to a tavern and try to get information about ways to enter the underground dungeon. But then they see the 3 bad fools there. Damon says he should avoid being found by them, or it'll be a hassle for him. Suddenly, AKA flies into the tavern and starts beating one of the fools until he turns into tomato sauce. She tells the others to go back and tell everyone she won't forgive them and that she'll get her revenge in front of them for leaving her behind as bait. Seeing all this makes Damon really worried too, but suddenly Shin appears in front of them and asks Damon about Yagiri. He says he doesn't know much about him, but he gets information from her about the secret dungeon entrance. Shin says it'll be fun to watch what they do, then returns to her own sage world. There at night, while talking to her maid, she gets an unexpected visitor. It turns out to be Herod, the analyst among the sage candidates. Shin tells him he found his way into her room using his problem-solving skills. Then he asks her to extend their exam deadline. Shin says she'll consider it in exchange for him taking care of Yagiri, and he smiles and agrees. After that, Herod goes back and hires an assassin with sage and spirit powers and orders him to kill Yagiri. On the other hand, the other sage candidates start worrying for their lives because they're afraid AKA will hunt them down. One of these candidates, named Riona, has the ability to boost her power. She finds AKA and tries to snipe her with high-speed rocks, but AKA blocks them like it's nothing and engages her. She completely wrecks her and destroys her spirit. But Riona says she's not at full power because of that stupid suppression ability the king put in place, which is active across the royal capital. Hearing that, AKA lets Riona go to recover, then flies off to burn the royal king's palace to ashes. After taking care of that, she comes back to fight Riona at full strength and proceeds to destroy her again. The next night, she fights the loser cook, who somehow manages to give her a real fight by conceptualizing her as an ingredient to draw out his strength. then using his status as a chef to fight with a kitchen, knife and shadow clone technique, saying, "It's a basic skill for chefs since they often need many hands to keep the kitchen running." But even after all that, Akea ends up turning him into roasted barbecue using her dragon flames. Meanwhile, we find out the reader guy has the ability to see the future, which writes itself into his notebook the moment he makes a choice. While all this is happening, Damon and Lot go down to the secret dungeon and discover that the Dark King's sister managed to break the seal on her own, but decided to stay there to avoid angering her brother. She has a serious brother complex and loves him a lot, which makes her nice to Lot and Damon too when they bring her brother's key to her. But when Lot tells her that her brother is dead and who did it, it makes her really mad, and she takes his arms and says she'll revive her brother. Meanwhile, we see Shin arrive at the dining hall to meet the sage candidates. After Herod gets an extension from her, she tells everyone she's not happy with how the sage's exam is going and thinks it's too easy. So she wants them all to fight each other until only one is left, and that person will be the only one to become the sage. This marks the start of a battle royale, where the guy with the Grim Reaper ability tries to use it on her, but she says it doesn't work on her because she fully heals herself by level boosting, then flicks him away with a tap of her finger. Meanwhile, Yagiri is chilling outside and notices David walking in his sleep as if under some kind of spell, and watches him jump into a ravine. He tries to help and ends up falling with him underground. The Dark King's sister, named Mana, transforms into her liquid form, Mona, and starts taking control of everything in sight as she floods out of the royal capital with intense force. While falling, Yagiri saves himself and David by killing their momentum with his ability, then meets Damon, who is also running for his life from Mana. They all end up catching an elevator that takes them up, and once they get there, Yagiri goes to meet Tomasha to find out what's been happening. She tells him about the battle royale, and they end up fighting a group of their classmates too. Meanwhile, AKA decides today's a great day for revenge and joins the battle royale as well. She ends up fighting a girl who has the power to summon all kinds of modern weapons, and when she starts losing, she summons a nuclear bomb like a total loser and throws it at AKA. The explosion destroys everything around it and takes Yagiri and the others in its blast, but Yagiri saves them all by killing the laws of physics. Why not? Haka manages to survive the blast by abandoning her human form and permanently transforming into her dragon form. Once she heals, she decides to make sure everyone is dead and finds Yagiri and the others alive in the middle of a burning zone. A control slit in her mind starts talking, revealing it's a future tech made specifically to counter Yugiri's instant death ability by avoiding detection from him. This effect works to a certain extent, but Yagiri simply kills AKA 2 when he sees the massive dragon approaching them. After that, Shin shows up in front of them and says she wanted to talk to Yagiri because she heard he would erase her. At that very moment, Yagiri uses his ability to kill one of her ankles, then starts killing her fingers, showing her who the real boss is here. Then he asks her to tell him about ways to return to their old world, but she just instantly teleports to her sage's realm and tries to heal herself. All her attempts fail, which worries her, but then Yagiri starts killing more parts of her and even begins attacking her beloved maid, Dei. This makes her give in and return to him, explaining that there's no way for them to go back because the link between their worlds has already faded. After hearing this, Yagiri asks her to tell him the coordinates of their old world and also asks for ways to gather the necessary mana. She takes out a philosopher's stone from her chest and says it's the source of immortality for sages and should be enough to power their trip if they collect enough of them. All sages have these stones, but the stone loses its power if the sage dies. After hearing this, Yagiri decides to let her go and returns to the royal palace with Tomasha, Damon, and the two spies, including Prince David. Once they leave, Mana manifests in front of Shin and captures her using her power, absorbing her into herself while calling her a pathetic loser. Shin tells her to remember the name of the person who will kill her as she points to Yagiri before sinking into her. Meanwhile, Yagiri and the others enter the castle and find the archbishop babbling about beginning his law and his era and being happy about Mana's awakening, but Yagiri silences him with his ability because he's way too annoying. At that exact moment, Mana manifests before them and says she'll destroy them too, but Yagiri silences her as well and ends the final boss fight in a second. With the kingdom now saved, David flies out of the castle on a ship with the two spies, while Yagiri follows behind clinging to Tomasha. who glides down like a hot Batwoman. Once outside, they notice Damon has run off again, and Yagiri says it's fine because he didn't like seeing his face. After that, he says he's going to look for the other Philosopher's Stones so he and Tomisha can return to their world, and says he'll split from the rest. The two spies agree to go their own way too and decide to go with David. At the same time, a few invaders land in the capital to see Mana's destruction and find Herod injured in the chaos. They decide to take him with them and fly away. While all this was going on in the royal capital, we see a bit of Theoda, who ends up reuniting with her sister while saving some of their people from slavers. There, she joins her sister and Riley and starts heading toward the royal capital because the little pink-haired girl wants to meet Yagiri. They arrive just in time to see Yagiri and Tomisha decide to head out and look for the other Philosopher's Stones. Seeing them, Risley jumps up and hugs Yagiri, saying she wants him to marry her while offering him her Philosopher's Stone. Yagiri wonders what all that's about, and Theoda fills him in on how Riley is obsessed with him, because she learned about him from her old self after awakening. With that, they all climb into Risley's carriage and head toward their next destination, while Yagiri decides to take a nap. And in the meantime, we see the queen watching the capital from a tower, wondering how someone could defeat Mana so easily. She decides it's way too dangerous to let someone like Yagiri roam the world like this and starts tracking him. And that's how Season 1 ends.